Greetings. Purpose of this video will be to give you an idea on how to make observations of online classes. We're tasked with observing classes and giving teachers feedback. So how should we do that? What is an effective way to do that so that it's useful for the teacher, for you to be there? I have asked a teacher from school to randomly select one recording from any of his classes, and you're about to see that while at the same time having a screen recording of the notes that I have taken during observing the recording of the class. It would be a little bit different had I been able to be in the class live, because then I will have seen the participants and maybe if they had their camera on or not. But the recording just had the teacher and the screen being projected, and I took notes for about 16 minutes of the class. So here we go. Here is the recording of the class and the notes that I've been taken. I will talk a little bit throughout to describe what I'm doing, to give you some tips on how you might like to do it as well.
In 8, first, in general, this has partly information that we need to...
So the first important part is the timestamp. It's really useful for the teacher when they read the information back to see the timestamps. And you can see that the timestamp here in my writing corresponds with the timestamp of the video itself in the bottom right hand corner, highlighted here.
The nuclear power plant and so on.
Where the teacher says something and I'm writing down what they've actually said, I use quotation marks.
So it's an interesting...
and abbreviations as much as possible. T for teacher, ST for students, Q for question.
Again, I'm going to post this. So
using the quotation marks helps the teacher review what they actually say, which is very difficult for a teacher to typically remember at the end of their lesson.
And some examples. So primary sources.
I've noted that the teacher said pay attention because that's related to classroom management, a useful piece of information for the teacher to review at the end.
Such as fossil fuel. So you extract the fossil fuel from the ground, you burn it, and you get energy. The nuclear energy.
The timestamps help the teacher understand how long they've spent on a particular part of the lesson. So in this example, the teacher, when he reads back the notes, will see how long he has spent describing each of the parts of the lesson. Again, this is extremely useful afterwards because rarely does a teacher recognize or know exactly how long they spent on a particular part of the lesson.
So you have to produce it first. And to produce it, you need some primary sources like fossil fuel, solar energy, wind energy, nuclear energy, and so on. Okay? So this is the first idea. The second idea. Renewable and non-renewable sources of energy.
Now, that being said, having a video recording of your lesson is one of the best ways for teachers to develop professionally, to go back and review their own videos. Now, I have wondered if anyone has had the time to do that, now that most teachers are recording their lessons.
Aren't they all derivations of solar energy?
Here's another good example of noting the question that the teacher asks, and then a summary of the interactions with the students afterwards.
Even more...
That's what I mean, yeah, like big derivations of the whole thing.
Could be. Like you can say everything exists because of the sun. Yeah, okay, fine.
It says the solar energy isn't renewable. Do you want me to tell you why?
It would also have been useful here to see the participants, to know exactly how many students were talking. I'm guessing from the voices it's 3 or 4, maybe 5, I'm not quite sure. But noting that is always really helpful for
Yeah, but
the teacher to review at the end also.
at the horizon, there's a guy who's standing there. So when the sun goes down, he turns it off. And
Nice, some humor from the teacher as well.
turns it back on. So with the lighter, like
ده بيهز
لا
البول.
لا انتوا فاهمينها غلط، هي برداية بيفتح البرداية.
or it could be, yeah. So it's like going from down up the curtain. Yeah.
لا بس كيف عم تجيب انرجي منها زيك؟
من البرداية produces the energy.
Exactly. So amazing physics session. Now, the non-renewable energies are the ones that either run out completely or take a very long time to renew. And the examples are fossil fuel and nuclear energy. So the fossil fuel is due to the
So now, because we're time stamping it,
animals,
the
humans,
teacher
and
can
so on.
see that he has spent 5 minutes
Material.
on this one slide,
300 million years
maybe 4 minutes. The first minute was the
Basically, it is renewable.
introducing the topic.
The lifespan or the time interval is like infinite. So that's why we assume it's non-renewable. Okay? So primary and secondary, renewable, non-renewable. The first 4 concepts.
Now, of course, it's not possible to note everything. So what I have chosen to
What?
note,
These are the notes.
you know, of course, comes from my frame of reference, but I'm always trying to think, what would the teacher find useful in the notes that he or she wouldn't normally be able to remember?
It says non-renewable sources, again, here.
So
These are from your book, by the way.
the questions that students ask, the
Just know that
questions that teachers ask, the actual words that they say are very, very handy to note.
you get from the ground, and it can be actually decomposed or like processed into crude oil, coal, and natural gas. Okay, so like these 3 together, we call them fossil fuels. And renewable, some examples here. So the biomass is the waste of animals. Okay, so how do they use them? Because human waste.
Note, I'm not spending a lot of time describing the content.
Produces gases like methane.
I'm just
And for example, in many
putting
countries,
markers in the notes so that the teacher can remember, oh yeah, I described that, I did this, I was talking about renewable sources
of their animals.
as they went.
What they do is they put them in huge containers and they process them.
And I'm not looking for errors, and I'm not commenting if it was good or bad. The notes that I'm taking are purely observable, what actually happened. The time to talk about good or bad or whatever, that can come afterwards. And typically, well, not typically, ideally in a conversation with the teacher.
And because it's hot at the core, so what happens is this water evaporates and turns into steam. So once in a while, when the pressure becomes too big, it just bursts out as energy. So this is called geothermal energy. So the energy coming from the ground, the heat energy coming from the ground. Okay? Now,
It says, how do we know that the center of the earth is hot?
by studying the structure of the earth.
So here's another example of the actual words that a student used to ask the question.
كورد
There
نحن ما بيطلع لنا كلمة
people
شمس
whose
بالصوت.
job is to study these.
ما في أي سياسة.
يعني on my يعني أنا
Again, if I'd been able to see the participants, maybe I would know how many students are contributing.
انت حسبتها هي ذاتها. On the other side of the word,
And also knowing how many students are in the class as well.
we can do an underground
Because knowing how many students are in the class and comparing that to how many kids have spoken is really important for the teacher to know.
What was it called? I forgot. Total
So you
Recall.
can
thing.
tunnel your way through.
In fact, this is a really critical piece because if you are observing a class in person, in the classroom and all the students in there, it's extremely valuable information to give back to a teacher to say that 5 of the 17 students contributed to the conversation. It makes them think, what were the 12 others doing?
Exactly. Because you'll do simple harmonic motion if you just make a tunnel from one part to the other and you just jump down.
Yeah.
Now, 2 important terms, specific energy and energy density. What are they? So it's a way, both of them are a way to characterize the amount of energy that a certain element or a source can give. So the first one is defined as, and again, the definitions are important, is defined as the amount of energy produced by 1 kilogram of a substance. So if I use 1 kilogram of a certain source of energy.
So again, the time stamping allows the teacher to know that now they've spent 10 minutes talking about the concepts that they're delivering.
Looking at the same thing, but
they can also look at the notes to see that students have been involved in the conversation twice in those 10 minutes.
Cube of the substance. Okay, so if I study it as a function of its volume, so every 1 meter cube of it, how much energy does it give me? Okay, now some examples are the following. So if we take coal, for example, the source of energy. So every 1 kilogram of coal, so if I burn
this little comment here, I was noting the way that the teacher was using the camera, and that's a really important one as well. When we're observing a Zoom lesson, is the teacher actually looking into the camera like I am now, or are they looking at the screen like I am now? Because that is a very different impact, or has a very different impact on you as the viewer or students in the class. If I'm the teacher and I'm looking at the screen, that doesn't make what I'm saying nearly as engaging as if I'm looking, and I shift my gaze now to the camera, and if I'm explaining to the camera. Really important distinction.
As a function of 1 meter cube, but it's more common to study it as a function of the kilograms. Okay, so this is for the energy density and the specific energy. Now, some examples just for us to practice and to get an idea of what kind of questions you would get. So it says we have a fossil fuel power station has an efficiency of 25% and generates 1,200 megawatts of useful electrical power. The specific energy of the fossil fuel is this much. We need to find the mass of fuel consumed each second. So most of the questions about this chapter will be like this. We don't have an equation. Okay, so we just have to use logic to understand what's actually.
Again, inverted commas or quotation marks to note something that the teacher has actually said. There is a tendency to summarize what the teacher has done. I could have written, teacher mentioned to the students that most of the questions will be coming from this chapter. It's much more valuable to give the quotation mark and actually write what they say.
52 per kilogram?
Yes, so this means that every 1 kilogram of the fossil fuel will give 52 megajoules of energy.
Okay.
It is when they say useful electrical power, it means after calculating what has been lost.
Yes, the useful is the output.
Okay. So,
Okay,
it generates more, but out of it, the 1,200 is.
If I'd been able to see the participants,
1,200
it would have been very helpful, because it sounds like it's the same small number of boys who are asking questions. I wonder if there are any girls in the class. I could have given that as some feedback as well. Knowing the total number would have been helpful to give the teacher some feedback.
Don't you just find 100% and divide that by 52?
And you divide it by the
Yeah, but
So think about it like this. You have an engine, which we represent as a cycle, something, whatever. It has an input, an output, and efficiency. So here we're saying.
So again, another reference to
Okay. Now,
the actual words the teacher uses. Think about it like this.
So what was the input? If the 25% is 1,200, what's the 100%? So we know from chapter 2 that efficiency is output over input power or energy. So 0.25. When a camping stove that burns gasoline is used, 70% of the energy from the fuel reaches the cooking pot.
So this has been a really good example of a teacher giving a class and interacting with students as we go. As a follow-up, we have our walkthrough form, and there's an option to leave comments. I could have typed these observations as I'm going. What I have been doing is I'll typically upload these as a file. I'll just take screenshots of them from my iPad and upload them as a file so that the teacher gets a copy of them. If I'm not going to have a follow-up conversation with the teacher, and I always offer to have a follow-up conversation, but if that doesn't happen, what I'll do is just pose some questions. Like, I wonder, one of the questions I might ask in response to this very short observation might be, I wonder how you could have prompted the other students in the class to join in the conversation. I wonder if there would have been a way to engage students more in developing the definitions. And that might be it. Again, I only saw 15 minutes of the lesson, and maybe the next 40 minutes or 35 or however much longer the class went for, maybe that's what happens then. So again, there's no need to say this was good, this was bad. I would probably say I enjoyed the class. It seemed like the students were involved, etc. But in the end, does it really matter if I enjoyed it? Not particularly. Does it make the teacher feel good if I enjoyed it? Maybe, but that's not really the point. The point is, how can the evidence or the notes that we give teachers help them reflect on what they've done a little bit better? Maybe the teacher will look at this and think to themselves, oh, I spoke for 17 minutes and there were 2 or 3 sort of conversations in there with multiple students. Maybe I want to get more of that happening. The teacher might read the actual words that they spoke when they asked the questions and think, maybe they might think, yeah, that was good, that worked. Or maybe I'll change that. That's really the value of the notes that you take during an observation. So there it is. That's a pretty much a summary of how you can really design your notes that you take during an observation to be useful for the teacher who you are observing. Because in the end, the notes are for them, not for you. If you have any questions, just let me know. Bye now.